something that's on my mind. It's in a lot of conversation. I think our church members, a lot of them at least, care is about the Southern Baptist Convention. The annual meeting of the Southern Baptist Convention is happening in less than 2 weeks. It's starting from the day we're recording this. So it's coming up fast.
It'll be the week after this drops.
And there's just a lot going on in the SBC. And, it's one of those things where I'm tempted to say something like, well, we're at a crossroads. This is a momentous thing that we're coming to an apex. And, the reality is that probably could have been said about a lot of annual meetings. And that it might actually be true more next year in Orlando than this year in Dallas. So, you don't know exactly how all the currents are going to converge. But I'd love to hear from you guys, first of all. So we are a Southern Baptist church. We actually, our church predates, the founding of our church predates the start of the Southern Baptist Convention, which is pretty cool. But we have been a long time, and I think as our church, influential in the Southern Baptist Convention. Why should we even care about this? Because we got a lot of things to do. We got a lot of things occupying our day, each and every day, and a lot of ministry that we do is in cooperation with other churches at the Southern Baptist Convention. But a church like ours could do a lot of ministry independent of a convention of churches. So why does this matter? And then I want to get to what are the big things that are being discussed or need to be decided on or are controversial right now in the SBC in particular. So first, why does it matter? Why is it important for us to be part of the SBC, and why should our people care?
I can just share I know that there's a lot of controversy in the SBC. I feel like every summer there's, like you said, the language gets used of like, we are at a breaking point. This is our biggest moment. You hear the final countdown music playing in the background. It's going down. I've been to the convention, and I will say, I'll just say the story that most people tell that I think is the most powerful moment is like when you commission all the IMB missionaries. And I think the reason that is such a sobering moment and such an exciting moment for everybody is it's like the room gets reminded of why we got together as a denomination, and then why we got together at the annual meeting, which is some wonderful gospel ministry is happening, and we are supporting that. So I know when I'm talking to church members in the hallways and when I'm talking to people who are asking questions about the Southern Baptist Convention and they see controversy and all these different things happening, why are we doing this? I always talk to them about that moment. I talk to them about our missionaries overseas and say, at the end of the day, the main reason that we are together is we are autonomous churches that are cooperating together for the Great Commission. And so when I think back on my memories at the Southern Baptist Convention, I do remember years where there were watershed moments of controversy and different things like that. But there's also a lot of wonderful things that happen too. There's great meetings in the hallway. It feels like kind of a family reunion. I remember a couple of years ago when I went back to the hotel room and I said, this is going to sound funny because the Southern Baptist Convention is controversial. I said to my wife, Taylor, I was like, this feels like it's going to be kind of like heaven is, because with less controversy and all that. But I did see all these people, and I was seeing this person I went to college with and this person I hadn't seen in years, and hugging them and how's ministry going? That's wonderful. And then getting updates on all of the ministry that is happening and has happened that we can be encouraged by. So that's why we get together, is to be mobilizing ministry together. But then also, and I think this is where it gets into the controversy, is we make decisions together about how that money gets used. There's statements that we make about issues that we care about. There's lots of important issues that we vote on. Who becomes the president? Who nominates all these committees that sets up boards of trustees all over our institutions? I mean, it's very significant. So I pay really close attention as a pastor. I'll often, during the week of the Southern Baptist Convention, just like have the live stream rolling in the background if I'm not able to go. Just listen to it and what's happening, because I care about how all of our people's money and resources and time and prayers need to be directed.
Heath, with that, I think a lot of our people really do care about the Southern Baptist Convention, but I do think the average church member, or probably even the average church member in other churches across the country, they don't understand exactly what happens at the convention. So what is happening at the convention? But this presidency thing really matters, and why does it matter?
Yeah. So the reason the convention matters, which it's important to note that the Southern Baptist Convention really only exists for a couple of days in June when we're actually gathered together. It's like right now, technically speaking, the Southern Baptist Convention does not exist. And the reason that's the case is because the Southern Baptist Convention is the opposite of most other denominations. So I just was in the United Kingdom for 2 weeks. We were in a lot of Church of England churches, and the Church of England is top down. You got HQ, and HQ tells all the churches and all the members, here's what we're going to believe. The Southern Baptist Convention is the opposite of that. At the Southern Baptist Convention, you've got thousands of independent, local, autonomous churches that come together, and they give marching orders up to HQ. Here's how we are going to run this cooperation of churches. So it's really the opposite. It's the reason why liberalism has had a much harder time taking root in the Southern Baptist Convention, because you don't have elites that marginalize the regular folks. You've got the regular folks that are able to actually marginalize the elites. And so that election for president, we got a great president right now, Clint Presley, friend of mine, love him. He's a faithful, godly man, faithful preacher of the word, faithful conservative. He's doing a good job. And it's the job of the president of the Southern Baptist Convention to appoint the people who fill the boards. And so if you have a faithful conservative president like we have in Clint Presley, he's able to appoint faithful conservative people who will be good stewards of their appointments and then their organizations. And if you have people who don't take those appointments as seriously, they're going to appoint less faithful, more liberal, or they're going to adopt some standard for appointments that's something less than. We want biblically faithful men and women who are going to serve as our ambassadors on these boards, then you get into trouble. So that election for president is how ultimately all of the convention-owned entities get populated with the leadership that makes the decisions on a daily basis.
Yeah, I think of it as really just a larger extension of the Baptist principles of congregationalism. And so a lot of people say, well, does the convention tell our church what to do? Well, no, our church actually tells the convention what to do because we send messengers. So no one gets to tell us who our pastors are. No one tells us how to spend our money. And yet, when we send our money to these entities, they're going to then make those decisions. So that's why the trustee boards are so important and the president. So I want to get to some of the things that are like the big topics of conversation and controversy in the SBC as a whole right now, and I want to frame it. I'll just list what I see as they are, what I think they are, and you guys can add in or clarify that. I think probably things that are going to keep coming up is one, that the law amendment, which was been voted on the last two conventions, but I think it's coming back, so we can talk about that, and that has to do with how we're going to handle. What we say about the issues about women's ordination, women serving as pastors, and what that looks like. You know, our statement of faith is clear, but how we kind of handle churches that are not following that. Secondly, the ERLC, the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. There was a vote about them last year as well, and it's not the first time. And
why would they come back up, though? I'm not following you.
They're definitely come back up because, if anything, more controversy has ensued since the convention last year.
Okay.
I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then the last thing I'd say is the call for financial transparency in the entities, like 990 level transparency is what it's usually framed as. And I want to frame that in each of those cases, I think each of those issues, part of the challenge is a lack of trust in institutions. And I think as a culture as a whole, as an American culture, we've just come out of a presidency, right? So we're just in the heels of the release of Jake Tapper's book, Original Sin, about the Biden administration. But even without the release of the book, there was so much, at least in our circle, so much distrust in institutions as a whole. And I think that's distrust from our highest institutions in our civil realm, and then our highest institutions, we could say, in our church realm as the SBC churches, is these entities heads, right? So the ERLC, these other entities in particular, NAM I would throw in there as well. So there's a lack of trust. in terms of what's happening. So, do you guys agree with that? Those are like the three kind of big issues. Would you want to add anything else to that, or say, well, I don't think that's a big deal, or I don't understand why that's an issue?
I want to pivot to Heath because I actually was just thinking as he was talking that over the last couple of years you wrote like blogs.
Yeah.
Getting ready, which I don't think you've been writing blogs this year, right?
You mean you haven't been reading my blogs?
Oh, I mean, of course.
I mean, they've been getting a lot of traffic.
Okay, but for real, like you historically have kind of set a precedent for.
Yes.
These are the big things I'm thinking about. I'm a Southern Baptist pastor going, so you haven't done that this year. But let's
Right.
make this the blog.
Okay.
Where like Richard's listed 3, but I'm just really interested. Are those the 3 that you're thinking about?
Mostly, I would add. I think we're in for a wild ride on
Really?
funding about legal issues and
Okay.
legal settlements. I think we're.
That's related to the transparency.
It's
issue.
related to transparency. I think we could be in that. That has the potential. I'd make no predictions because you get those people in a room and God Himself is the one who knows what happens. But I think there's potential for that to be the biggest thing that goes down at the Southern Baptist Convention in the last 10 years.
Legal. You're talking about the executive committee.
Executive
Talk to me about
committee
that.
funding legal settlements. There is a proposal to take that out of the budget this year, and the argument is sort of, hey, we've made these decisions, we're going to have to pay the piper, and I'm not sure that argument is going to be received well.
I think that the executive committee is requesting $3 million of cooperative program money.
That's correct. It might be a little more than that, but it's $3-ish million, and I think I'll say it this way: if that is not absolutely explosive, I will be shocked.
How did we get there?
Okay, how did we get there? Okay, so we got there because we got there at a confluence of several different things going back several years. So we got there because of public revelations of sexual abuse that were connected to the Southern Baptist Convention. I say connected to the Southern Baptist Convention because all the allegations were not created equal. There were some, you got the Houston Chronicle that did their reporting years ago, and there were some like 700 cases of sexual abuse. And every single one of those cases are important. Nobody ever thought they were unimportant. It's just that they were unequal. So some of those cases happened inside churches. Some of those cases happened with people who had been pastors. Some of those cases happened with people who were connected with churches, but it didn't happen in the churches. Some of those cases were alleged to have been part of a cover-up at HQ, at the Southern Baptist Convention headquarters and the executive committee. And so what you did was you had just this addition, this multiplication of story after story after story that got to 700, but it wasn't all created equal. Well, because Southern Baptists love Jesus, because they love the Bible, because they love righteousness, and because Southern Baptists want to be sure their kids are safe, they showed up at meeting after meeting and they said, we want full exposure of what has gone on. We want full disclosure of what happened. If anybody did anything wrong, we want to know about it. If there was a cover-up, we want to know about it. And it was in the midst of making those decisions that we got into a complicated spot. And so people said things on the record and publicly that they should not have said. They were ill-advised statements. We entered into settlements, legal settlements, financial settlements with people that are disputed and debated. There were legal disclosures and indemnification of liability that didn't have. There were just all sorts of things that happened, and what took place is that the good desire on the part of Southern Baptists to be clear and open and honest and safe and above reproach led to multiple millions of dollars of expenses that have now come due. And not all of those expenses were equally wise. Not all of those expenses were done with the lights on. Not all of those expenses were made transparently, and so there's a lot of debate. Let me just give one debate. We're independent, local, autonomous churches. Most churches don't want to pay the legal bills for a problem that happened in another church. We don't at First Baptist Jacksonville, we don't want to pay the legal bills for a church that did something stupid in Milwaukee that we had nothing to do with. We made none of those decisions. We had nothing to do with that. We're giving our money to the cooperative program to pay for missionaries and theological training and that kind of thing. And so there's going to be distaste about paying millions of dollars of unwise money. I think most Southern Baptists will pay whatever it takes to be legitimately safe, to be legitimately transparent, will pay money that is legitimately owed. But that's where the debate is going to be. That's where the issue is going to be. And if it were me, I would not tell Southern Baptists this $3 million and you're just going to have to choke on it. I would not make that case. As a matter of fact,
Well, they've already spent 15.
50, yeah, whatever it
million.
is.
Yeah,
We'll never
yeah,
know.
well,
but yeah, they've spent a lot.
That's, yeah.
And if it were me, so a couple things are true. One thing that is true is no organization, not First Baptist Jacksonville, not the Southern Baptist Convention, no organization can exist without paying some legal expenses. If every single person who gives to First Baptist Church said, I want none of my money going to pay lawyers, we would go out of business because you cannot function in this society without paying some kind of legal fees. It's true for First Baptist Jacksonville. It's true for anybody who's listening wherever you work. It's true for the Southern Baptist Convention. Reasonable people know we're going to have to pay some legal fees. But I'll just talk personally, my stewardship as the senior pastor at First Baptist Jacksonville is to ensure that our people know that, hey, we got to pay some legal fees, but I'm not asking them to choke back and pay stupid legal fees. They need to know, like, hey, we're paying these legal fees. We're doing that well. We're doing that wisely. We're doing that under advisement. And I think what would be the best thing to do is for those with responsibility to say, listen, let us tell you some of the lessons we learned. We listened to people who weren't our friends. We listened to people who were out for our destruction, and they were masquerading as being our friends, but they were out for our destruction. We disobeyed legal advice and exposed ourselves to unbelievable legal liability that was unwise. Here are the lessons we've learned, and we are standing before you saying we are sorry for that, and we will not do it again. And now we're asking you for your help. Would you please help us pay the bills on these things that we did, and it is not going to happen again. Here's where we think this is going. Here's what we think is coming due. It's this transparency issue. I think if there was that kind of humble transparency, I think most Southern Baptists would go, fine, I'll do it. Without it, I think we're in for a wild ride.
Well, and I think the only way that would happen is if there was already not just those words said, but like some sort of concrete action steps taken. And so, that goes. So the three things I mentioned, that's probably the one that's connected most directly to the financial transparency. And the thing is, okay, look, is that what's best? Well, I don't know. That's to be debated, but it's actually to be decided by the convention of churches, the messengers. But what's frustrating, I think, for a lot of people is it keeps getting caught up in this kind of bureaucratic red tape, deferred to committee, et cetera, et cetera. So they're not giving the messengers an opportunity to do a straight up or down vote. Let the messengers decide if they think that's helpful or not. But I think this mismanagement of money that is so obvious to me as someone who is following this from afar. And then the resisting of the financial transparency. And what's coming out is like exorbitant salaries from people that aren't even like key members of leadership in certain these entities. And I think when we're asking people to give money in our church to further the Great Commission for missions, and we're saying we're giving a percentage of that to the cooperative program of the Southern Baptist Convention, and it gets divvied up according to the proportions that are decided. I think we're asking people in good faith, like, hey, like you're giving that money because you know that money's going to go to the Great Commission. Now, do I expect the IMB is going to have lawyers to help because our missionary is going to get caught up in legal stuff? Absolutely. But when they're making dumb decisions and then they want to hide how they're spending money, and the things we are seeing money being spent on seems like a complete waste. And most of the churches in the SBC don't have millions of dollars worth of budgets. And so they want a stricter accountability. It's a stewardship issue.
Yeah.
For me, it's a stewardship issue to make sure our money is going in the to what it's intended. It's kind of like we need the SBC version of Doge. You know, like someone the weed out, because I do think I haven't heard people frame it this way. Maybe you have fraud, waste, and abuse. Right? There's fraud, waste, and it can be well intended. I don't think there's well, there might be some dark money in something. Well, that's actually one of the concerns for the ERLC. So that might be a segue. Before I switch, so the financial transparency. What do you think about that? Do you think that's a helpful thing? I mean, a lot of state conventions already have it. Every other profit is already required to file it, right?
Yeah.
It's Christian nonprofits or any other nonprofit. So this would be like the seminaries. This would be the NAM, IMB, ERLC. They'd all have to file these or have that level of transparency they're offering, even if they don't file it.
Yes, I think. Here's I would make this about a very fundamental issue. Leadership only works, particularly leadership in ministry. It's true in any case, but the only kind of leadership I've ever had is ministry leadership, and it's just 10 times truer in ministry leadership. The leadership just takes trust.
Yeah.
It just takes trust, and it is your responsibility as the leader to gauge whether that exists or not. And if you think there's trust and there isn't, it doesn't even matter if it's your fault or not. It's your responsibility.
No, that's right.
And you have to do what it takes to get trust. And so anybody who listens to me, I have plenty of conversations with people off the record and on phone calls and text messages and that kind of thing. And what I'm saying publicly is what I'm saying privately, which is we have a trust deficit.
Yes.
And when you have a trust deficit, you can argue about whatever. You can say, well, that accusation isn't fair or this, or you don't know what I'm trying to do.
Take it the wrong way.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The trust deficit is your responsibility as the leaders to fix. And so the only way you can fix it is by proving we have nothing to hide. We're not going to manage the microphones. We're not going to manage the process. We're not going to try to cover anything up. If you want to know it, we'll tell you. Mm-hmm. That's the only way to get it back.
Yeah. No, I agree.
What's the number one issue heading into this year's convention? And it's a hard question, but
yeah. So I think Richard's right. I think we're going to have an ERLC situation for sure. The so-called law amendment, what our procedure is to keep churches with female preachers out of friendly cooperation, that is coming back. First year. It failed last year. We didn't even make it a year without finding out that actually we really did need that kind of guidance. So that's coming back. It's coming back. It's coming back huge. I don't know how it'll come back. Again, we've got to get in the room and see who makes it to microphones and that kind of thing. But that's coming back.
Well, it's going to be interesting who's trying to stop it from coming back too.
I mean,
yeah.
Yes, yes, and that's always the subtext in this: is who are opposed to these things, and what are they saying, and do their arguments pan out? So we were told that we didn't need the law amendment because it's clear we have this, we just don't need it; it's unnecessary. And then we didn't make it, but a few months before we found out that whoever said we didn't need it, actually that wasn't so, because apparently we do need it. So ERLC is going to be big. The female preachers going to be big, and this funding issue, I think, has the potential at least to be the biggest of them all.
And I think what we're seeing related to all these things too is there is, I think it's a generational shift happening and a kind of mood shift and even a theological vibe shift, right? I'm seeing so many parallels to what's happening in the larger civil context too. So, for instance, on the who's going to the microphone defending the speaking against the law amendment? Well, it's the so-called SBC elites. It's like past presidents, groups of them coming together to microphones. That's how it's kind of put in kind of a public presentation. So just I think the last week there was 10 former SBC presidents that all signed a letter saying that how important the ERLC is, it needs to continue. They're against motions to defund it or abolish it. Not the current president, mind you, but and no, I don't think any entity's heads would have been part of that, of course. But but to me, it's like there's a tone deafness to all the concerns, and then it's becoming a party of the like a divide between the elites, so to speak, like these kind of like people that have held power, been past presidents, think they can speak, and then they expect people to kind of get in line, and then there's a whole bunch of average church folks, pastors, lay leaders, messengers that are there that are they just don't care what they have to say. They're just frustrated, and they're not seeing them lead in a way that's establishing trust. They're not seeing them lead in a way that is addressing their concerns. They're ignoring their concerns. They're saying you shouldn't have that concern. They're not even trying to help establish that. They're like, that's not a thing. Leave that alone. So that's a problem. But
So what if we hang here for a minute?
Okay,
What
sure.
is the ERLC? What do they do? And then let's talk about what are the concerns there.
it's an acronym for the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. It is an entity of the SBC. They're funded through cooperative program money, and they are you could say the public policy arm of the SBC. They exist to engage in issues in the public square, the civil square, on behalf of Southern Baptists.
Okay. What are the concerns?
Well, concerns is they've been out of step with the Southern Baptist Convention rank and file for a decade and a half now. Kind of started under the leadership of Russell Moore. I think it'd be fair to say that he began what would be seen as a clear drift and a separation from the concerns of regular Southern Baptist churches as those were represented in sort of our public policy arm. That separation of here's what Southern Baptists care about and here's what you're representing. That drift happened, really was highlighted during the first Trump campaign. Donald Trump is not an easy personality for Christians to process because on the one hand, there's a lot of elements of his life that all of us would go, that's terrible. On the other hand, in a binary situation where you have to choose between Trump and Clinton or Trump and Biden or Trump and Harris, we have to weigh realities in an imperfect world. And I think that most Southern Baptists felt like Russell Moore's representation of his view of Donald Trump was such a caricature and such a bend away from what they thought that why are we paying this guy? He left, and I think it's common knowledge. I think everybody this sort of open letter that he wrote, which was couched as a leaked letter, but really it was always intended to be public. That created some bad blood, and now you got Brent Leatherwood, who's the head of the ERLC, who is leading in the same way that Russell Moore led, and there just is continuing to be this sense that there's just a cleavage between this entity that we fund and what we actually believe. And it's created this question of, do we really need this anymore? And that's the debate that letters from publicly released letters notwithstanding, that debate's gonna happen at the Southern Baptist Convention this year.
There's just a reckoning there. I mean, I just think about the conversations that I have with church members as we get close to the Southern Baptist Convention. And I think that for at least 3 years in a row, the ERLC comes up every time. And I'm not telling people what to ask me. They're just saying, well, what are we doing with this again? That's the question. And as a pastor, how do I answer that question? It's like, actually, I don't know. I actually don't have a great answer for you because the things that you're bringing to me are valid concerns. And I think it gets to this issue of trust, is that when the issues come up, we're not actually talking about substantive things. So we're like trying to bring up substantive problems, but oftentimes I think a normal Southern Baptist can feel a little gaslit by the whole thing of like, why are you even asking that question? Like, what's wrong with you guys? Like, don't you see all these other people trust them? Like, you're the problem. You need to stop being so suspicious, stop believing a bunch of conspiracies about these things. That's one way to answer a question. Another way to answer a question is just to listen to it and to say, well, let me answer your question. Let me answer the substantive concerns that you have. And what happens as you do that over a number of years is you actually start building trust because you're answering questions in good faith. Even if you don't like the question, even if you think the question is even coming at you in bad faith, if you answer it in good faith, what that does to a normal Christian who loves the Lord and loves people and wants to see the gospel go forward is they say, I know that person's trying to answer my questions in good faith. And I think that we're just starving for that right now as Southern Baptists. And all of these issues that we've been talking about is, can we get substantive, not weird, strange diplomacy things going on where we're like nodding at these people and nodding at those, but just answer the question. And
that's what we're not seeing.
that's what we're not seeing. And I think one of the reasons that doesn't,
They're writing them off.
that doesn't resonate with pastors is, we're all congregational churches. So what pastors do all year long in their congregational churches is they answer questions from their church
Yes.
members. And so then when they go to the Southern Baptist Convention and they're a part of a massive business meeting that they lead back
Yes.
at their churches with Robert's rules and everything, and it feels like, okay, you're not doing what I do all the time with my people, and now I've got to go back to my church and I've got to answer this question for you, but you're not giving me anything to answer with. I think that's a major concern, and that's the reckoning moment. It's a reckoning of trust, and then a reckoning of candor.
I think oftentimes when there's tension in an organization, whether it's political or the Southern Baptist Convention, it very easily gets painted into two camps. You got this camp and this camp. But usually when you're involved in things, you just realize it's more complicated than that. I remember I was involved in local politics back in Louisville before I moved here. And you get on a whiteboard and start drawing circles of who's in what camp, and you just realize it's actually a really complicated set of concentric circles, and these people align with this person and this person, but this person only aligns with that person. Mm-hmm. I think you would be helpful here. What are the camps that you see in the SBC right now? We hear about controversy, and it very quickly gets conservative, liberal, but maybe zoom in just a little bit for us and tell us the lay of the land that you see.
I think that's an unbelievably hard question to answer. And I think some of it is case specific. Like, we would talk about the lay of the land a little differently on women preachers and cooperation than we would on disclosure on abuse and legal settlements. And I don't think it's one size fits all. I think, and this is the kind of thing that we're going to really put this format to the test, because this is the kind of thing we talk about all the time. But this is also the kind of thing that I've chosen not to say because I've wondered if it's helpful publicly, but I guess I'll violate the whole format of what we're doing here if I'm like, I don't want to answer the question.
No transparency.
Yeah. I don't want to be transparent as I answer your question, Cody. Yeah. So I'll just put it out there and say what I think is happening right now. I don't think mostly we're dealing with issues of liberals and conservatives. I don't think that. So I get church people coming up to me like, Southern Baptist Convention going liberal and I want us to get out of it. Or I don't want one red cent of my money going to the ERLC. Like, because there are a bunch of liberals over there. I hear that all the time, and I have things that I say in those conversations. But I think in the main, not exclusively, but in the main, we are not talking about a division between liberals and conservatives. I think sometimes we get mixed up on this, and people are like, well, I don't agree with you and you're a liberal, or I don't agree with you and you're a fundamentalist. I think mostly that's not the case. I think where the dividing line right now is what reality you see. That's what I think it is. I think most of the names we've talked about, with a few exceptions, are basically pretty conservative and would be on the same page. And in any event, I would want to say, hey, let's define biblical faithfulness and biblical conservatism by Bible categories, not your response to just like some debate that, hey, a procedural concern or something like that. Like, let's not just baptize people, all of our opponents, as liberals because we have a different way of approaching this than somebody else. I think the issue is, what is reality? What do you see? And so you take this transparency thing. I think the dividing line is between people who liked it the way it was and want to keep it that way, or the people who sense this is a different day. And what we need is transparency. I think the dividing line between, hey, we don't need procedural stuff about excluding women, because there's no risk that we're going to have a bunch of women preachers in the Southern Baptist Convention. The other side goes, there actually is a risk, and there's a reason we keep talking about this, and there's a reason we're going to talk about this every Southern Baptist Convention until the end of time, until we finally deal with it. And so it's, what reality are you seeing? Every conflict is something about who you're going to listen to, who's wise, and who's foolish. And so I think we're having a debate right now. I think there's a changing of the guard. I think we've gone through the children now, not just the fathers, but the children of the conservative resurgence. And now we're into a third generation, and there is a picking up of the baton. And I think the Southern Baptist Convention is not in a fight about liberal and conservative. I think we're in a fight about whose wisdom do we trust to lead us in these days. And every year we get to show up and make fresh decisions about that. And I think we're going to decide, like, hey, I think the future belongs to those who are going to be transparent. I think the future belongs to those who say, you know what, we're going to be biblically faithful and conservative. And I don't mind being honest about that. I don't mind taking votes about that and being clear that, hey, only men can be preachers. We can make a procedural vote about that. We can make a convictional statement about that. But I think the future belongs to people who are willing to say, that. I think the future belongs to people that say, you know what, we are going to have to pay some legal bills. Nobody wants their money to go to legal bills, but we are going to have to do that. But we're not going to pay stupid legal bills. We're not going to listen to people who are our enemies, masquerading as our friends, who are out for our destruction when they say they want our best. I think the future is for those who want a convention that is convictional, transparent, safe, and bold. And I think if we listen to those voices at this convention and future conventions, we're going to have an awesome Southern Baptist Convention in the years ahead. And if we don't, we're going to have a splintered convention in the years ahead.
It seems to me like a different, like there's competing, like I agree. I don't think, we have people who are denying the truthfulness of the Bible and people who are affirming it, right? That's not the divide. But it is a very growingly stark division between what effective ministry looks like in 2025 and beyond.
Correct.
And
I don't say there's no liberals out there that are a risk.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, I
don't think that's the main dividing line right this minute.
I think churches that are having women serving in pastoral roles of any sort, especially over men, is it representational of a liberal drift.
I agree. But I also could imagine that a faithful complementarian would look at that and go, I don't think that's the biggest problem we've got. And so my charge against such a person is not you're a liberal or that you're a liar. My charge is I don't think you're seeing this the right way.
Yes. Yeah.
And therefore, what type of leadership do you call upon to respond to that? Because there's a leadership where you can be convictional and bold and say, hey, no, we're just going to be really clear. Or there's a leadership where you can say, let's play nice and let's not create fights.
Yeah.
And we've had that.
And that's the debate, sort of, that the Southern Baptist Convention is having right now. And we're going to figure out what the Southern Baptist Convention is made of. I suspect the Southern Baptist Convention is going to prove that they want the bold convictional leadership, and they're not going to choose the more milk toasty, let's put things on the back burner things. But I've been wrong before.